Go.
Hello and welcome to Writer Mother Monster. I'm your host, Laura Ehrlich, and our guest tonight is Ramona Ausubel. Before I introduce Ramona, thank you all for joining us. And if you enjoy the episode and Writer Mother Monster in general, please consider becoming a patron or patroness to help me keep the podcast going. And if you are out there and want to chat with us during the conversation, please go right ahead, ask questions, make comments. We'll weave them into the chat. And for those of you listening to the podcast after the fact, thank you so much as well for joining us. Now I'm excited to introduce Ramona. Ramona Ausubel is the author of 2 novels and 2 story collections. Her most recent book, Away Land, was a New York Times Editor's Choice selection, a finalist for the California Book Award, Colorado Book Award, and longlisted for the Story Prize. She is also the author of Sons and Daughters of Ease and Plenty, No One Is Here Except All of Us, and A Guide to Being Born. She is the recipient of the PEN USA Fiction Award, the Cabell First Novelist Award, and was a finalist for the New York Public Library Young Lions Award. Her work has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times, Tin House, One Story, Ploughshares, and many other journals, and she teaches in the MFA programs at the Institute of American Indian Arts and Colorado State University. Ramona lives in Colorado, where she has 2 children, ages 7 and 10, and describes writer motherhood in 3 words as effort plus magic. Welcome, Ramona.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks so much for joining me. As I told you before the show, I've been a fan of your work for a long time, and we'll get to that. But first, tell me about your 3 words that you use to describe writer motherhood.
I feel like those 3 words describe each of the projects, that writing is so effortful and that the effort is nothing if there's no magic in it. If I don't include like my weird little heart in the thing, the writing is just a block. And that is definitely true of kids too. And I feel like they require obvious and constant effort and they bring tons of magic. And I have to remind myself that I get to bring magic to it too. I feel like it can be easy to get like cornered into the effort part as a parent and forget that you're invited to be part of that magic too.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and actually you touch on something that I wanted to ask you about immediately, which is the magic. And anyone who knows your work knows that there's that palpable energy of let's call it magic or the unreal. Some people have used the word whimsy, but that I feel like is sort of a too light word for your work, which is actually, I don't know, you get at really, really big, important truths through the magic, through the unreality. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I don't know where to start exactly. Tell me about magic. Why is it important to you?
I think that I see the world, the really real world, as being profoundly strange, that really is what it feels like to me. And I think we all go about our lives and we do the things we have to do. But if we were to unzip the suit of normalcy that we all wear and let out all of the stuff that's in there that we're feeling and thinking, it would just explode and take up the entire universe. We have so much in us. And so I feel like the magic in my stories is a way of giving that some body, of saying I'm going to take that feeling that you have and call that feeling real. I'm going to turn that into something exact and specific and physical. And I have a story about a guy whose wife is pregnant and she's there, she is producing literal magic with her body and he feels totally outside of this project. And then he wakes up in the morning with drawers in his chest one day. And then he starts putting stuff in the drawers and things happen because of this. But I felt like a way of taking the feeling that he had and making it into something physical and real. But a lot of it is just like not every story has that like that's a very clear A to B correspondence. Not every story does that, but I feel like magic is always a way to make something that I see as real, which is often a feeling or an experience, and making it undeniable so that a person on the outside can see it and feel it too, and can't just say, well, that's just a passing feeling. That's not really real. Don't dwell on that, because I think we get that message all the time that like your feelings are not, don't worry about those things. Just proceed with logic and reason and whatever. Like, no, no, thank you.
Yeah, especially as women, I think there's something about like women's emotions that we're supposed to tamp them down, right, and not engage with, particularly the more unpleasant emotions. Definitely. Or the really pleasant emotions, I guess, like desire, right? So it's like both ends.
Totally. Yeah. And it gets smushed down all the time or disincluded. Just like, don't bring that into the conversation, because that will just slow us down, or that'll get us into some kind of unproductive state. Like, what if that's really productive? What if feeling and being awake to your experiences helped us in the world?
Yeah. Have you always been awake to your experiences, or is it something that came to you a little later?
That's a good question. I think I have, actually. I think that actually maybe it's harder now. I think I always was, and that I never, like, when I was young and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I always wanted to do something where I got to pay attention. I was always writing, and I knew that there was I was gonna have to also earn money and have a job. I did not have a magical float of cash that I could just like do whatever I felt like doing. But I also felt like I had to be doing something that mattered to me. And I luckily still get to do that. And I think that the weight of responsibility as I get older makes it harder. Like that thing of remembering to be part of the magic and not just let the magic happen with somebody else takes more work now, or more reminders for myself. Like, yeah, no, you really got to do that.
How does that come out in your life with your kids? So you said that they, kids offer magic, I guess, just by being children. And some of the ways that you described the magic in your work, I don't mean that it's childish, but I do mean that, like, isn't that kind of the way that children experience magic in some ways? It feels physical and real to them. Like, I could see a kid being like, I have a drawer in my heart where I keep my favorite things or whatever, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that they can still feel, they haven't sort of been disabused of all of their impulses or imagination or whatever it is. So I think some of it for me is trying to pay attention, to like stay tuned in to the real thing that's in front of me, or the wonderful, strange thing that's in front of me, and not let it be like children are, talking about whatever, doing their thing or playing in the backyard, or, I mean, they're always up to some weird project, the two of them. And I'm usually having to, at the same time, pack lunch or make sure that everybody has all the crap they need in their backpack, and clean things, and, do laundry, all this stuff, or my job. I'm definitely always preoccupied with that. And I don't like that feeling. So I think that it's all in that zone of being like, nope, this is important. Pay attention to this. But it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to shut up, because the responsibilities are real. I really am responsible for those things. And if I don't do them, like, I mean, even today, I forgot to put the lunchbox in. I made the lunch and then I left it on the counter. And I don't know why that. I was like, I don't know that I was necessarily doing anything more useful, but it just happened. And luckily she ate school lunch and it's fine. Nothing terrible happened in the world. But it was up to me to do that, and I didn't do it. And that kind of thing, it's just hard to have to be the person on whom all of those things lands, and to trust yourself through it. And to also remember to be like, and blow it off, because here's the fun thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and to remember to find magic in the everyday, when often the everyday does not feel magical. Like, school lunches do not feel magical.
No, I hate school lunches.
Yes, I do. I have found that I do too. And my daughter just started kindergarten, so I have a long way to go of school lunches.
I know. They're really one of the things that is like, I was like, I'm sorry, it's going to be peanut butter and jelly and apple slices every day. There will be no variety. This will not be an interesting part of your life. I just can't.
That makes me feel better. Yeah. Yeah, she definitely has not even peanut butter, just sun butter and jelly, which she doesn't even eat. So I'm like, why do I make this sandwich?
No, you're going to unpack the exact same lunch that you sent, basically, with like maybe one weird little bite taken.
Exactly. It's like, maybe just put it in the fridge and give it back to her the next day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To do.
Or like sometimes I end up eating it. So I'm just like, what's the snack I want at 3:15 when I pick them up? I should just pack myself that and put it in their backpack so that I can have it later.
I really like that idea, actually. Then at least it doesn't go to waste, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So let's talk about all the things that you do. So you're a tenure track professor and a mother and obviously a writer. I mean, that's already a lot of things. And I think I've given up the question of how you balance everything because everyone says, unless you feel differently, like there's no balance. It's not about balance, right? So how do you organize from day to day to make sure that you touch on all of the things that are meaningful to you?
That I feel like that is the ultimate question, and it changes all the time. And I always want to hear how everybody else does it because I'm like, seriously, how do you do it? Because how do you have any good ideas? Because I always need more good ideas. Right now, I am trying to. I mean, I just like every semester it takes a little while to figure out how the rhythm of the week is going to go because classes are at different times and the classes are different. And so there's I don't know at the beginning how where things will exist and how much time everything's going to take. So it's now this is the end of the 7th week of classes. So I kind of now finally have a sense, and it's gonna then it's gonna be over and I'm gonna start all over again. But so I'm trying to. A lot of it for me is the feeling of putting the things at least in their basic form on my calendar and making sure they're written in every week. So like writing, I'm writing. I can't write on the days that I teach because I just don't have enough time. There is not enough time. But so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I have a block of writing time in the morning. And then all of the other teaching stuff that I have to do, which can vary from like grading or I'm right now reading a thesis. I've got another one coming next week and I had one last week and I've got, emails and all the stuff. So there's a block of that. And then I pick kids up on those days. And I try not to have other things that I'm trying to do other than maybe like answer a couple emails that really need to happen that day. I am really trying to hang out with them from 3 to 5 or whatever when we eat dinner, because that's what that time is. And then if I know that that's there, I feel less crappy when it's the other days and I can't be as present because I'm like on Tuesdays and Thursdays I teach until later in the afternoon and then I have to drive from school, which is an hour away. So I don't do any of that afternoon stuff on those days. I just don't. But I feel like because I know that it's there on other days, it's okay. Yeah, but it's kind of it's like impossible math always. And it's hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What was your schedule like before kids? Particularly with writing?
Who even knows? I feel like that time was just like, I think about it now, I'm like, what did I do? It was just like time was just like this giant endless sea that I could swim around in. I don't know what happened then. Also, I don't even remember what happened partly, but it's like this reality is so much my reality. But I taught some, but I didn't teach so much. But way before when I was in grad school, I taught then too. But then there was a gap in between grad school and when I started doing more teaching, when I wrote a lot. But I also, even then, I couldn't write. I've never been a person who could write 8 hours a day. Like there are those writers who are like, I can sit down, clock in at 9, stop for a lunch break, take a walk, maybe take a nap in the afternoon, but basically write full time. And I feel like I can't. I don't know. I run out of the kind of brain that's required for that. I could totally I would love to have 2 hours of writing, then take a walk, then come back for another hour or two. That would be great. That would be ideal. But that's not that's not possible. And that is actually okay also. It doesn't have to be those luxurious long blocks. I think I really thought that that's how it had to work when I was younger and before kids. And I guess I'm kind of glad in a way that I had a little while where I was writing, where I had more time than I needed, because I think I proved to myself that I didn't need that much time and that that wasn't actually the ideal. So that's good. So then when the kids happened, it was like, okay, actually I'm writing just as much as I was before. I just needed to squeeze it into these smaller cracks, and I feel motivated to do it when it's time, because that is it. It is not happening later. You have this hour. Better get to it, lady.
Yeah. And it's funny, I hear that from so many other writer moms that, you know, the compression of time really, it doesn't compress the work. It just it's like a laser focus on the work rather than like squeezing the work too. So it's encouraging to hear, right?
Yeah, I think it is. And I really think that that's true for a lot of people.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit. So I'm also interested, going back to specifically to writing, that I've heard you say in other interviews that a couple of your books started not as fiction, but as nonfiction or something completely different than what they turned out to be. And particularly, Awayland started as nonfiction, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you read it, you're like, how? That's not possible. It has a cyclops in it and like some animal monkey. What do you mean this was nonfiction? And what I mean is not that I interviewed a cyclops and was going to publish some journalism about him, but that so when I finished grad school, I was given this fellowship, and it was just like, it was a no strings attached, like, here's a few $1,000s, go try to make a writing doorway out of this. And so I felt like I didn't trust myself enough as the writer that I really was to lean into that. I felt like I needed to come up with a smarter, better idea. And the smarter idea felt like it was to meet a need that I kind of saw in the world, or thought I saw in the world. I'm not even sure that I really did see it, but there was the like, nonfiction is more valuable. I'll do something real. If I do something real, then I can stand on that, and that will hold me up in a way that if I, wrote weird stories, nobody would ever really value that. So I came up with this plan to travel around the world. I got my husband to quit his job, and I wanted to write a book about what it meant to consider starting a family at that moment on the planet. So this was in 2009. And it seemed like, a really good, it was a question I was asking. I wanted to know, like, what is it? Is this okay? What are the ethics of this? And what does it feel like to different people? So I was truly curious about this, and we struck out and started traveling, and I did do a bunch of interviews. I set up interviews, which is not something I knew how to do, but I just like emailed everybody I knew, like, do you know anybody in these places that we're going where I could like just talk to them? And I had really interesting conversations with people, and I paid attention to those conversations, and I wrote things down. And I felt happy to be talking to them. But about halfway through the trip, it sort of dawned on me that they're very different to go out and have some chats and like think about something than it is to try to coalesce those ideas into an entire book of nonfiction that tries to actually answer a question. And I'm also not a trained journalist. And so I was like, my interview techniques were loose, and it was like very conversational. I wasn't extracting perfect quotes. I did not know what I was doing. So also, much more importantly than not knowing what I was doing, because I don't know what I'm doing when I'm writing novels. I still don't. And that's okay. That's actually fine and good. But in this case, the real problem is that it just wasn't my project. This was somebody else's project. I would totally read that book, but I wasn't going to be the person to write it. So we came home, and I felt crappy. Like we traveled for about 9 months, and when we got back, I felt like, and so I wasted that opportunity, took them like this amazing gift and squandered it into something that I had no business doing. But over the next few months, I started writing these weird stories, because that's what I really just do, no matter what, whether somebody wants me to or not. And they started to gather steam, and then I started working on a novel too. So it was like the novel kind of got some some steam at the same time. And then the stories started to pick up, and I began to see that they could exist together as a book. Like, oh, I was writing a book. I was not writing a book I thought I was going to. And I was also not writing a book that I could even have guessed at before. It was one that I had to discover, which is also something that I know about myself now and have learned to trust and value.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much there that I want to talk about. I'm trying to figure out where to start. Let's start with bringing a child into the world during that particular period. Why was that a question? And you touched on it a little bit, but why was that a question you were particularly grappling with during that time?
I think it was all the stuff, just the usual human, disaster, heartache, like the way we are as a species. We're hard on each other, and we are not just, and all that, but also climate stuff, just feeling like, what is the planet going to look like? Will there be a place for these people? Which is not a question I know the answer to still. And it ended up feeling like I'm going to trust, and I'm going to say yes to this thing, not knowing how it will work, which is still remains scary, even though I don't have to keep remaking that decision. I still have to keep up that trust.
Yeah, I think that's the decision to have a child, like no matter what your questions are, whether it's the environment or whether it's the right time and place for you personally or whatever the question is. It's like the trust that it'll just be okay. Because how can you know in advance? It's like the great unknown, right?
Yes, exactly. And you also don't know what kind of person you're going to get. Like, you could get anybody. You really don't know. And you are welcoming a complete stranger into your heart and life for the rest of your life. And they're going to change everything about how things work in a functional way. They're going to change everything about how things work for you, like on an emotional level. The world will change around you, and you can't guess about how that's going. It's just like you are diving into the darkest, blackest, unknowable space, but also that's where all of the magic comes from. I feel like that's probably true about everything we do. But we just don't recognize, it's not as clear, it doesn't present itself as such quite as clearly in any other circumstance than a child. It's just so blatantly that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's lovely. So was there a decision involved? Like, did you always want to have a child, or was it something that you kind of realized that you wanted, but then you had to grapple with? It sounds like maybe some of the ethics of having a child.
Yeah, I think I think I always assumed that that's something that would happen. I really like kids, and I feel like I felt, I don't know. I remember even being, when I was a little kid myself, thinking like, this is crazy that someday I will definitely have my own children. And most of those thoughts were like, and I will buy them all the stuffed animals that they want. I understand how important that will be to them. That was my very clear directive about what kind of mother I would be.
Sure.
But yeah, so I think it was like I was on the, like, it would have been a big departure for me to choose not to. And I think I would have had to keep remaking that choice over and over. Like, it wasn't the kind of thing. I have a lot of friends who are like, nope, I didn't really want to do that. And then maybe have to come up against that in a very clear way. Like, okay, really though, am I gonna choose not to do this? And then they make that choice, and then that choice is like, feels clear and firm and steady. And so I think for me, it would have been a kind of hard and sad choice to keep making over and over again. Yeah. And then also there was some of it that was just like in the realm of the experiment, kind of like the experiment of being alive. I felt like, I don't know, I don't really want to leave that door closed. I kind of want to find out what that is. It feels like one of the essential human experiences, and I don't know, I want in. I want to know what that feels like. So, yeah.
Yeah. What was the timeline with Awayland and Motherhood? Did you finish writing the stories before you became a mother? Or?
I did not, no. So I'm trying to even put it all together. So we took the trip in 2009. We came home, figured out, like, stayed with parents, pieced things together. And I had written I had written A Guide to Being Born, which is my first collection, and gotten very far along on my first novel, but I published a story when I finished my MFA, and I got a bunch of notes from agents, mostly from agents and a couple editors when that story came out. And I thought, like, okay, I need to make something of this because these people are going to forget all about me. I am just like a little speck, and I need to like make something happen before they forget that I exist. So I sent a couple of people a too early draft of No One Is Here Except All of Us. And everybody unanimously wrote back and was like, no. And also like, what is this? So we left on the trip right at the end of that, having gotten all of these rejections. It wasn't actually that many because I wasn't like I was flooded with notes. It was a few. But I had a teacher had sent the manuscript to an editor at a small but very good press who was still waiting to read. So I was waiting on that last read when we set off on the trip, and we were in Morocco a few weeks in when she sent me a note saying, I'm not going to buy this book. But she did give me a really, really useful read. And one of her questions was, why is this novel set in the first person plural? Which it was. And it was really important to me that I wrote it that way to begin with. But when she said it and when she sort of talked it out, I felt like I understood that I could keep that collective voice, but that I really needed a main character. Mm-hmm. And there was no way to not have that. So once I like stewed with it and felt grouchy and sad on a bunch of bus rides for a while. And then finally I kind of came around and understood I should just try this at least. So we stopped in the middle of our trip and I changed the point of view. I spent like a week, just like technical, like changing actual words on the page, and read it back through. And I felt like, yep, this is the book that it's going to be now. And I have way more work to do to finish this, but now I understand how it's going to work. And I'm going to give it one more big, huge, like give it my whole heart for a few months. And then I'm going to send it out. And if that's it, that's it. And I'll bind it. I had a plan. I was like, I'll self-publish it, but not like for other people, not to sell. Just like I will bind 5 beautiful copies and I'll give them to the people who really love me. And then I will move on. And so that was all happening while we were traveling. So then we came back and I started writing the weird stories, but I didn't even know that they were going to be a collection yet. And I revised that novel. So it was like the stories were kind of mixed into the revision process. And I finally did revise it. And there were other pieces where I ended up finding an agent based just on the stories from A Guide to Being Born in the midst of all that. So finally I told him, you cannot read this novel until I'm finished with this big change because it is not ready for you. And I need to actually finish on my own without giving it away. Mm-hmm. So in the spring of that next year, I felt like I've spent really, really like, that was a period of time where I actually did write all day, every day for like 3 months. I worked really, really hard and I just felt like I needed to understand and believe in and be in control of pretty much every sentence in the book, which was really different from what I'd been doing before, which was just like, I don't know, let's see what it feels like. And also maybe it's good enough. Could it be good enough? And this time I understood it can't be good enough. I have to really have done it. There's no skipping things. You just have to actually like go for it completely. So then he sold the 2 first books that next spring. So that was 2010. And then we moved for my husband to go to graduate school in Santa Barbara. So then I had books under contract, but that needed revising. And I did that while I got pregnant that next year. And I revised with my editor's notes in the few months, the early pregnancy moment. And the book that No One Is Here Except All of Us came out when my son was 3 months old. So it was like all mixed into this like very blurry moment of time. I'm like, I'm not really sure how all that happened, but I guess it did. So it's okay. Yeah. And then I went back once that was out and done, and Guide to Being Born was really pretty much done. then I started writing the next novel and the stories and really pulling the stories from Awayland together and writing ones that were missing. So yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. I know, it was a lot. It was very, very full.
Hold on, I think I'm getting an echo.
Oh, is that better?
Let's see.
Oh. You want me to talk? Should I keep talking?
You keep talking. I'm talking. I think it's coming out of your speak. Oh, there it's.
Is that better? Going away? I can try.
No. Oh, there. I think that's getting a little better. Okay. Well, anyway, I'll ask you a question so that. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Oh wait, now I just lost your audio completely. Can you hear me?
Bear with us. I can hear you.
I can't hear you.
Oh no. Let's see. Are you there?
I can hear you barely. You're like very, very quiet.
Oh, okay. Let's see. If I turn up my microphone, is that better for you?
A little bit. Yeah, it's still pretty quiet. I don't know if it'll be quiet. I can hear you enough to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll ask you a question and then we'll figure it out.
Okay.
Where was I going with that question? Oh, so how did the experience of pregnancy play into the stories that you were still revising and then writing? Like, did it play in at all, this thing happening to your body?
I'm sure that it did. It is a crazy thing, pregnancy. It is wildness. And I definitely felt like, because I'd written stories about pregnancy already. I'd written a few in the first book way before I was close to being pregnant. So I felt like, in a way, I worried a little that I would like meet that real moment and be like, oh no, it's not so crazy as but it's way crazier than I ever could have imagined. I felt like I got there and I was like, whoa, because it's like, just like the idea of it is crazy that you are forming a human body inside of you. And that's like that, like on this week, the toenails are developing and that your body knows how to do that. Even though I have no idea how to do that, I did it without knowing. I think that is an idea that has stayed with me as something really important and valuable, especially as a writer, that there's that, like, you can know how to do this without knowing how to do this. And sometimes the work is to just keep listening and trusting and following the kinds of knowing that don't come from like right here in your brain and that aren't going to announce themselves as reasonable or logical or clear or that you could even ever explain to somebody. I felt like that was really affirming of who I was as a writer and thinker, that I could say, I'm going to trust the self that I have, that it can do all this stuff, even if I don't understand how. But also like, I felt like that it sort of, my brain changed a little bit. The things I was noticing were a little bit different. And this sense of time as a little capsule, the way that when you're pregnant, you know that it's not going to go on forever. It has a pretty clear timeline, even if there's a couple weeks, maybe even a few weeks on the end that you could run one way or the other, but that there was a kind of intention in it and a way of saying, this is now, and after this there will be a different thing. And that thing also, I think that stays true for little babies too, that there's the first week, which is its own thing, and then there's the first month, and then there's like until they're crawling, and then there's until they're walking, and there's a sense of time as, I don't know, sort of regulated and something that you can both anticipate, because there are some guessable, or maybe anticipate, not that every child does exactly the same thing, but there you can sort of imagine that you'll be in this like time envelope in a certain way. And so you have to appreciate that and do that part, because that part, you only get that part then. You can't, like, I can't do the toddlers, I don't have toddlers anymore. That is not what my life is like. And so it's good that I tried to appreciate that then, because right now I have a whole different reality. So, and I feel like that started in pregnancy and felt like it was kind of, I don't know, reminding me of that in my writing too, that feeling that I need to write what is mine to write right now. That I can't imagine the book that I'm going to write in 10 years. I don't know what that is yet. I don't need to know what that is right now. All I need to do right now is to write the thing that is really pulling on me or pressing on me right now. That's it. And I write it all the way, and then whatever happens to it, and then it's time to move on to the next thing. Yeah. Which is not exactly like 100% pregnancy coupled, but it's there. That I think that was reinforced by that experience.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And I hear what you're saying about the time of a child's life as being so specific and capsulated. It's kind of a good way to encapsulated. And then, they move on from being toddlers, and then they're children, and then they're, in middle school. And yeah, it's interesting. What is the, if you can share with us, what is the thing pressing on you right now that you need to create?
Well, I sort of feel like I'm kind of at the edge of a switch over a little bit. So I'm finishing the last big version of a new novel, and I've been working on it for, I don't know, like 4 or 5 years ish, kind of somewhere in the 4 or 5 year zone. I was thinking about it for a while before I really started it. And it is about a scientist. She is a single mother of 2 teenage daughters, and she's working on a project to reintroduce the woolly mammoth with her university's lab. But she's a graduate student. She went back, she raised kids and then went back to work later. So there's lots of stuff about motherhood, about time and value of time, what the world values in our time and what we value in our time. And there's also stuff from the daughter's point of view about their relationship to what matters to their mom, to what they want, and not totally wanting to be so involved with this project as they are, but because she's a single mom, they have nowhere else to go, so they are looped in, and it becomes theirs in a way too. So I've been spending a lot of time on that for the last few years. That's pretty much what I've been working on, and it's getting really close though. I've got a few more chapters to revise, and then I'm going to do some read it aloud to myself, which is a part of the process that I really need and is useful to me. And then I will send it off.
That sounds fabulous. You'll have to come back when it comes out so that we can talk about it. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about writing about motherhood before the actual experience. So you said that you wrote some stories, and I remember those about pregnancy before you became pregnant. And here you're writing about teenagers before you have teenagers, right? Your eldest is 10. Is that right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about like anticipating certain elements of motherhood before they happen and how that works out in your work.
I think maybe this is an insight into my like weird brain, because I feel much more anxious about something until I've like kind of at least like made a conceptual place for it. Not that I understand it, certainly not. Even after you've done the thing, you don't understand it. But I feel like I need to build a spot to put it in my head, at least. And so that is probably partly what that decision was about. I also think that for this book, partly the decision was more technical, just the feeling of like, it would have been really tricky for the story to work the way I wanted it to work with little kids on board. They just would have required a totally different kind of attention from their mother, which they were not going to get. It would have meant that she was maybe a little abusive because she's really not going to pay attention to them for a good while. And they wouldn't have been able to go become independent, which is part of what I really wanted to have happen, is to explore the question of what independence looks like, of what selfhood looks like, of what differentiation looks like. So I needed them to be older so they could actually do that. And I wanted them to be able to, like, I don't know, there's something about that moment in life that really felt connected to the sort of scientific imagination and the what if. I feel like when I was a teenager, I thought so much about that stuff. I thought about like, what if it was like this? And what if we would like hang out at people's houses, and maybe we were a little stoned, but also we really felt these things, and then be like, dude, what if it was like this? We spend hours and hours having those conversations, which is so like wonderful and beautiful. And I wish I still had time to do that. Like the adults don't get that time anymore. So I wanted them to be in the book partly because they brought that kind of energy into it. Yeah. But I feel like I sometimes think it's so hard. You imagine your kids and you're like, how could you be older? Like, what are you going to be like when you're older? It's so crazy. And now that I teach college students, I sometimes think about that. I like sit there with these 21-year-olds right now. I have all seniors, and they're so sweet. I see them like the, boys with their floppy hair. I'm like, my kid is going to be that in like 10 years. That will be what he's doing. Maybe, I mean, if it follows a path that is recognizable to me, who knows? But it is actually really reassuring to look at them and see how dear they are. I'm sure that they have troubles and things are hard and that they mess up and whatever, but I feel like I can see their little hearts, and that is very reassuring to me. So yeah, kind of like taking a little microscope and peering out toward a place you can't quite see yet.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Tell me a little bit more about the teaching side, and just, yeah, tell me about teaching those dear people.
The part that I really love is that I feel like it's such a privilege to be in this space with them, because I'm teaching creative writing mostly. So mostly I'm asking them to really be themselves and to feel and express those feelings and to write. I don't have any, like some professors have like a genre limitation. You have to write something literary. You can't write fantasy, whatever, which I think it makes sense. I can see why they would do that, but I don't have that, because I feel like I want these guys to write whatever they want to write. If that's what's true for them, that's what's true for them. And I'm not going to decide that my version is more important than theirs. So that means that they're bringing in things that genuinely they care about. I've got, students who are workshopping. They're like, not all of it, but some part of their 6-part fantasy novel series with a bunch of dragons, and it's great. I don't read those things in my regular life, but I get to read them because that's what somebody's handing me and saying, this is what's most important to me right now. Will you please be there to hold it? And I feel like in a lot of ways, that is almost the whole job, is just being there to hold the thing with somebody else. I can comment, and I do, and I will tell them everything that I can think of that's useful, and I will try to help them figure out where they want to stand in this and how to move forward and how to make it better and what they want from it and all that stuff, all those questions. But really, in the end, the most important thing is just being like, can you hold this with me? Can you tell me that this is real and believe in it? And that's it. I mean, some of my teachers, the people that I think about are that matter forever, are just the people who did that. I don't remember their particular comments that they made, but I remember that they said, you made something, and I see that thing.
Yeah. They validated that you were a writer even before you published something, right? And it was worth your time. And speaking of magic, I mean, that's kind of a magical thing to be for somebody, right? The person who holds their piece that's straight out of their brain or their hearts, and before anyone else gets to see it.
Yeah, I think so. I feel like that really is magic, and it might really matter. Some people are like, I don't care if you care about this. I freaking love it. I think about this all day. I think it's amazing. I've got it all plotted out in my head. It's going to be incredible. I truly don't care what anybody else thinks. I am plowing along, and that's great. There are a few of them, and that's wonderful for them. But most of us need somebody to be there with us, to believe in it, and to keep doing it, to keep coming back over and over again, which is what it requires. Yeah. I mean, there's so much else. There's so many things in teaching that are sort of, it's the same thing that I was talking about with the parenting, of needing to remember to affirm the magic part, because I feel like there's a very long list of to-dos. I have a lot of things that I should do and I need to pay attention to, because they're my job to pay attention to. And I want to teach stuff too, but I feel like it's important for me to remember that if I just if I just show up and pay close attention to what somebody made and reflect that back to them, that's also will have been enough, even if I didn't get in some like, perfect lesson about point of view or whatever.
Yeah. I love that throughout you've said pay attention as sort of a catchphrase, but tell me a little bit more about paying attention, both in writing and in parenting, and why that's so important, because I see that as like a theme in this conversation. What does it mean to pay attention?
Yeah. I think that is actually, if I was going to put a value like in my list of values, I think that probably is very, very high. And maybe it's kind of, I don't know, one of just a couple that would last my whole life that I could apply across the board, whatever I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I feel like as a writer, it's about the care that's required to make a thing come to life and to really believe in it. If you're not paying attention, it's shorthand, or it becomes lazy, or it's about somebody else. It's a story. It's that thing of like, this is the story that I think the world would value, but not that I value. And that for me to pay attention to what I feel and think is to recognize my actual self in it and to do the thing that is my work to do, not somebody else's work to do. Which, if you are paying attention, if I am paying attention, I notice that. And if I am, or if I have my attention cast towards some like idea that is that I'm digesting from the outside, that could derail me for a while. And I feel like with the kids, it's just like, that's it. That's the whole thing. If I really pay attention to them and listen to them and laugh with them and hear about listen to the very long description that my son will give of the book that he's just read or the thing that he watched, like really like, tell me about this world. That's all he wants. He loves that. That's his best thing. Noticing them, the time goes by. They turn into different versions of themselves. And if I don't pay attention, I miss it. It doesn't. I'm not part of it. That my attention is what makes me be part of it. And that's the whole goal, is to like be in the room for the real thing. And same thing with teaching. Just like, don't phone it in. Don't like show up as the pretend teacher who I feel like and this is a lesson that I have to keep learning. I'm not going to try to be a different kind of teacher. I'm really going to try to be the person that I actually am. They're going to get lots of teachers. I don't have to be all of them. I'm just going to be my one self and as truly as I can be. And hopefully that will work for a lot of them. And if it doesn't work for everybody, that's okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I've got this like little thing flying around. What are your other, so you said it's like you have a handful of, I forgot how you worded it, but it was great. I don't know, a handful of philosophies, I guess, for your life. One is to pay attention. What's another one?
Well, I think about when I met Jim Shepard, the writer, when I was in grad school, and he came and talked to our class, and he said that his writing advice, which I think he actually got from somebody else, but I don't remember who that person was follow your weird. And I really like that advice. That felt very important for me to hear that then, and it stays important, and it keeps on being useful because it's that same like reorient toward who I really am. Don't do that thing where you're like, I'm going to perform the thing I think you want me to be. Whoops, I never cared about that. And then I've just spent a whole bunch of time pretending something that it has now failed, and now I have to start back over again. So like, what is it about this story that I'm working on, the way that I'm a mom, the way that I'm teaching this class? How could I be the most me in this as I possibly can? How can I just like follow my like real compass? That one is very helpful to me. And I don't think I'm ever going to be done learning it. I feel like it is really, we get so much messaging about the kind of people that we're supposed to be. And it's really hard not to like kind of like go to the middle or find some kind of outside norm that we can just like cover ourselves in. Luckily, in a way, it never works for me. I feel like I try that and it just doesn't work. It's bad. I don't succeed at that. So, which is something that maybe at times I've felt like I wish I could just like cover myself in the blanket of normalcy and just disappear and do the easy thing.
Mhm.
But it just doesn't work. And I have to follow my weird. I don't know. I just have to. It's the only way that it like happens. So here I go.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it's interesting because it's not weird for weird's sake. Like when, as I said at the beginning, when we read your work, it's not, well, I feel like whimsical is a word that means weird for weird's sake, right? Like it's like it's sort of pushed over the top in a way that doesn't feel true to what it is. And that's not a word that I like. Like I feel like whimsical is like, ugh. So weird, I feel like is a much better word. Like it's there's something real about being weird. Like it's just what it is, what it needs to be. And that's what your work feels like to me. So I love that, follow the weird. Can you talk a little bit about the, which book was it? The first book, about your first novel where you set out to write, it was based on your grandmother, right? Stories of the women in your family. And you set out, it sounds again, I don't know if it was nonfiction or fiction, but you had lots of notes and interviews. And then you had to, I remember you saying somewhere, put it aside and follow the weird in that book too, right? And sort of like, what is it actually? It's not this thing over here that's based on the truth. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so my grandmother was born in Romania, and she came to the US in 1926 when she was 6 years old. And so they escaped, that side of the family is Jewish, and they escaped dangerous situations. But earlier, so then anyways, okay, so let's start with that. But I had all these stories from her. She's a really good storyteller. She's really funny. She's still alive. She's 101 and a half. And she's amazing and great. And I'm the only grandchild on that side too. So I felt like I was responsible for all of these stories that really were important stories. And so I was a poet in college, and then I had been hanging out with her a lot and hanging out with my other grandmother and feeling like I should do something with this. These are these amazing stories, and it's my responsibility. And so I'm going to do a prose thing because I can tell that they're like narrative. These are not poems. And at first I thought it was going to be one novel, both sides, because the other side of my family is totally different. I thought it would be like these two women's view of the 20th century, and it would be really interesting and cool. And then I started writing, and I realized that it was way, way too big generally, but definitely for me. Like I'd never written a novel before. I had truly no idea. I'd never written anything that was like longer than this. Like I think I need to choose one side to start with and do that. But I still had a lot of interviews with her, and she also had given me documents, and we, taken down boxes in her closet and stuff. So I was going on a lot of research, and I kind of ran out of it. Like I put it all down, and then I felt like, there it is. That's what it is. It's just like, and it was kind of like a bad Fiddler on the Roof. Like I couldn't get it to do anything other than sort of the stereotype plus new details that I had added, that I had been given. So when I finally came back, I put it down for a while, and I thought, there's no way I can do this. I used those pages to apply to grad school. So they got me there. But then I got there and thought, no way am I starting that novel. I do not know how to write a novel. I need to learn to write stories first. So I started writing stories first. Over almost 2 years, I wrote stories. And then when it came back to the novel pages, I understood that I was going to have to write my own thing. That this was not going to be a transcription, and it was not going to be, I could pull whatever I wanted to, but like the energy of the thing had to be new. So I sort of created a kind of point of departure, and I made some big changes to the story so that I felt like I owned it in a way. And one of the changes that I made was to move it in time. So instead of being First World War story, I moved it to the Second World War. I also made that decision because I wanted to to be able to gesture to the war and not actually write it. And I knew that readers were going to be able to fill in a lot for me about World War II, which they would not be able to do for World War I. So I did that, and I that was part of that first person plural decision too, and why it was so important to me is that I felt like I wanted to write this collective voice. I wanted to write the entire village, and there was something about that felt like it gave me an access that I did not have if I was writing a single character. And so I wrote the whole thing in this new way. And it was crazy. Like the novel was crazy. And I wrote the first draft in 5.5 weeks, and it was complete gobbledygook a lot of the time. But it was mine then. Then it was my book, and it was not the same thing at all that I had been working on before. And I felt like I had like sort of surrounded myself with it, and I could move forward from there. And it went through like 18 drafts and over a long, long time. And it was a process, and it changed profoundly from that first draft. But without that kind of point of departure and allowing the real stuff, the factual stuff, to like settle down into the ground so that it felt like I was not putting it away. I was just letting it like turn into the mulch from which new things would grow. So it was there. It was like part of everything. Nothing could have happened without that. But it itself would not like pop through the surface of the ground. It would be a different plant that grew, but it would be because of the energy of the stuff from before, if that makes any sense.
No, that definitely makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great description. I don't remember if I asked you in advance, but I'll ask you now if you'd like to read a little bit, if you have like a short piece from Wayland or whatever you'd like to read to us. And that would be a great way to close us out, to hear some of your work.
Perfect. Okay.
All right.
I think I will read the very beginning. Oops, I lost the page. Hold on. Of a story called The Animal Mummies Wish to Thank the Following. That's not where the story was. Hold on. Sorry. Just a second.
No, that's okay. And I'm going to, when you're ready, give you the whole screen here. So if I go away, that's why.
Okay, great. Okay. Actually, I'm changing my mind. I'm reading the beginning of a different story instead.
Okay.
I just looked at it and I decided that this is this one, really. Okay. So this is the very beginning of Do Not Save the Ferocious, Save the Tender, which is from A Wayland. It was dark all the time, so it was dark when the ship's captain crept into the corner where his young daughter was asleep. It was dark when he carried her out onto the deck and raised her up in the moonlight to better see his claim. The whole sky turned green with fire. The girl looked up at her father, at his matted beard. He said, "I loved you first." He thought of her 9 years, all of them under his care. "You loved me before you hated me? I loved you before anyone else did. I'll love you after whoever buys you stops." The captain lowered his head and kissed her on the mouth. She smelled like fish oil. She turned away. The sea churned below them, and the captain was no less lost. Through the girl's thick clothes, a little bit of human heat escaped. The girl was young enough to seem alive. He said, "We're lost. We've been lost for weeks. I'll take something good before I die." The captain kissed her again, mashed at her with his thick tongue. Yet more sea rolled under them, yet more water. The girl pulled her head back and looked up at him. From a leather belt, she drew a blade, which glinted. It might have been the only clean thing on board. The girl raised the knife, and she sliced her father's lips. By morning, the captain's face had begun to blister and rot, and at the very same time, the ship began to blister and rot, as if the man and the bilge were one body, as if he had hot mouth-kissed a hole right through the lumber, straight to the glacial abyss. In a single day, the bottom softened, and the craft split open. Men and women and children and babies and chickens and goats and bricks of butter and yogurt and dried meat and murky vats of alcohol bobbed on the freezing surface for a few breaths before starting the slow sinking journey to the bottom of the world where the muck-thick gods would welcome them. I will stop there.
Thank you. And thank you so much for joining us. This has been so much fun.
It was great. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to talk to you.
Yeah, you too. Stick around for a second afterwards so I can say goodbye. Okay. But thank you, Ramona, and thank you all. And thank you. Thanks, everyone. It's been another wonderful episode. If you enjoyed it as much as I did, please consider becoming a patron or patroness of Writer Mother Monster. And as always, stick around next week for our next episode. And thank you all for joining me tonight. Thank you.